All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. We are meeting on a very significant day in the history of our city. It was 4 years ago today, on January 27, 2017, that the Trump administration institutionalized xenophobia, racism, and Islamophobia in the United States by issuing the so-called Muslim ban. This heinous executive order, which went into effect the next day, marked a huge step backward for our country and inflicted incalculable pain and grief and suffering on Muslim immigrants and refugees, both here at home and around the world. These were individuals who had plans to visit family, return to school, or simply create a better life for themselves in what is supposed to be the land of opportunity. Though one of President Biden's earliest actions was repealing this ban, that harm is still palpable in our city. And it's up to leaders at all levels of government to put in the work to repair the wounds of this terrible action, both within our Muslim community and across our immigrant and refugee communities who were forced to endure this horrible indignity over the past 4 years. Chicago is a city of immigrants. From our founding by John Baptiste du Sable, an immigrant from Haiti, and throughout every chapter of our history. And we are drawn from every corner of the globe. Our city has been built and defined by our brilliant immigrant and refugee communities, who, despite the challenges of the past 4 years, have continued to enrich our cultural and economic landscape. That's why I'm proud to announce that one of the measures City Council passed today will amend once and for all the Welcoming Cities Ordinance to further protect Chicago's immigrant and refugee communities. I am proud to have sponsored this ordinance along with many members of the City Council. It's time. Thanks also to the years of hard work by the Immigrant Policy Working Group, which spotlighted the carve-outs and worked tirelessly for many years to get this done. And without your hard work, this day would not have been possible. So thank you to the working group. Our status as an open city and a welcoming city for all people is both a part of our heritage and must be a part of our present and our future. But while we are certainly proud of this heritage, the fact of the matter is we can and must do more to support our city's more than 557,000 immigrants, 30% of whom are undocumented. That's why during my campaign, I was clear that for our city truly to live up to its values on protecting residents, we had to eliminate any exceptions that would prevent the Welcoming City Ordinance from fully guaranteeing safeguards for our residents. We have a responsibility to protect all of our residents, regardless of their status. And that's just what the Welcoming City Ordinance amendment passed today by Council does by codifying my executive order and eliminating the exceptions that would have allowed our police department to cooperate with ICE, protecting survivors of crime by ensuring police will support them when they file a report or seek immigration relief, creating a more inclusive municipal code by eliminating the word citizen and replacing it with public, resident, or other non-status words. And by stating once and for all that being an immigrant or a refugee is not a crime. Now, I also want to strongly condemn the racist and misguided comments by 2 members of the City Council. It will be rare, at least I hope, that you will see me take this podium or any other to call out members of the council. But based upon the comments of 2 today, I feel compelled to do just that. And those 2 are Alderman Napolitano and Alderman Ray Lopez. I just have to say, shame on you. We can and we will disagree on policy. And I believe that we must continue to press for immigration reform. But spirited debate, which is at the heart of our democracy, is not the same as using racist tropes and xenophobic rhetoric to promote yourself on the backs of others and demonize them. And we dare not be silent when that happens, particularly not when it's coming from the mouths of city council members. We cannot indulge in the racism and the xenophobic tropes, and our silence would be complicity, and I will not be silent in the face of this kind of fear-mongering and suggesting that by taking the actions that were taken today by members of the City Council, an overwhelming majority, by the way, that at the local level, when we seek to protect any group of vulnerable residents, that somehow we are inviting criminals to run amok. That is wrong, it is racist, and I condemn it in the strongest terms possible. After what we have as a country have endured these last 4 long years, hard years, at the hands of a racist president who used his Twitter feed like a cudgel against anyone he felt like demonizing at that particular moment, and particularly focused his attention on the immigrant and refugees communities across this country. This man spared no opportunity to deepen the divides. That is not what we need in Chicago. We are better than that as a country, as a state, and certainly as a city. Again, let me thank the Immigration Policy Working Group and advocates, the aldermen who have championed this work for years, including Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, who is the chief co-sponsor of this initiative, Alderman Mike Rodriguez, Alderwoman Rosanna Rodriguez Sanchez, and all those members who spoke so eloquently and passionately today in support of this ordinance. And I also just want to note the original sponsors of the ordinance for formally starting the process and the journey that culminated in today's actions. This makes Chicago a leader in protecting immigrant and refugee civil rights, and is a great way to officially turn the page on the horror that we experienced in the last 4 years, to put the Trump administration formally in the rearview mirror as far as the city of Chicago is concerned, and to give our immigrant and refugee communities the peace of mind and safety that they deserve. Next, I want to highlight 2 other measures that were passed today that also build on our values of equity, inclusion, and safety for our residents. First, the City Council passed an ordinance to increase fines on air pollution. Now more than ever, protecting the health of our residents has to be a top priority. That's why, as part of our ongoing citywide effort to further protect our residents from environmental hazards, this ordinance will allow the City Department of Public Health to assess higher fines on industrial facilities and demolition contractors that create dust and risk the health and quality of life for our residents. I want to also thank Environmental Protection and Energy Chairman George Cardenas for his partnership on this initiative, which will help keep companies responsible for their impact on the residents who live near these facilities. And I look forward to working with him and the rest of the City Council to pass a broader air quality ordinance in the near future. Second, City Council has officially green-lighted a project to expand cargo operations at O'Hare Airport. The project, developed by Maryland-based Aeroterm, will advance with a renewed commitment to hiring more Chicagoans and contracting more Black, Latino, and women-owned firms. You heard comments from members of the City Council talking about this historic agreement, and I agree. Upon completion, this cargo facility will be the first of its kind nationally at this scale to be constructed by a Black-led construction team. I want to thank Finance Committee Chairman Scott Wagesback, Aviation Chairman Matt O'Shea, and all the aldermen involved on this initiative, which will not only build on O'Hare's reputation as the #1 airport for cargo operations based on value, but will also reaffirm our city's commitment to providing good-paying, sustainable jobs for Chicagoans, especially those from historically excluded groups. And finally, I want to highlight some exciting community and land measures that were passed and introduced today. First, the City Council has officially designated the former Woodlawn home, a civil rights catalyst, Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley, and the former Edgewater home, a spoken word artist, Ken Nordine, as Chicago landmarks. These measures will ensure that the upkeep of the homes of these influential and important Chicagoans and help to forever immortalize their legacies on our city and our entire country. And second, City Council has also approved a pair of open space projects on our north and south side. Thanks to these measures, private and underutilized lots in the Indian Ridge March Nature Preserve in South Deering and another in Lincoln Square will be repurposed and give residents from near and far new spaces to gather, be creative, and connect with their communities. And third, City Council has also introduced a handful of park and garden projects on our south and west sides, in addition to land acquisition proposals that will advance the neighborhood investment goals of our Invest Southwest signature economic development initiative. All of these efforts taken today build on our city's work to create a more equitable, inclusive, and supportive Chicago for all residents, no matter their circumstances, as well as enhance our ongoing public safety efforts, which I want to take a moment to specifically address. I know that carjackings have been, unfortunately, on the rise recently. And I want you all to know, again, that this is an issue of top of mind for both me and the entire police department. As a result, CPD has doubled down on its commitment to preventing carjackings and holding assailants accountable by adding an additional 40 officers to its carjacking unit and sending detectives to meet with carjacking victims and witnesses immediately after the crime to treat these incidents with the seriousness that they require. We must also remember that we aren't the only city grappling with this issue of carjacking. It's a problem that many other municipalities in our entire region are facing. And because of this region-wide crisis, I am convening a regional group of mayors and police superintendents later this week. This is a regional problem that requires a regional solution. We have strong partnerships across the region, partnerships that I am very, very proud of. And we will lean into these partnerships to tackle this public safety challenge that has no borders. And given the disproportionate role of juveniles who are driving this surge, we need to craft proactive intervention strategies to reach them before they make life-altering bad decisions for themselves and the harming others. I want to once again thank everyone involved with these initiatives, and I look forward to working with them to continue securing, improving, and protecting our great city. And at this time, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mayor. Since you ended talking about the carjacking, as some would say, crisis, I'm going to start with a question from Tamon Bradley about that. Given the surge in carjackings carried out by young teens, do you think prosecutors should ask judges to charge juveniles as adults for aggravated hijacking cases?
Well, I do think that you have to take each of these cases case by case, and you're aware that there were laws passed in the recent past to really put a curve on the automatic increase of the possibility of juveniles being tried as adults. Each of the circumstances are unique. What I ask is that we look strongly at these cases. We look at whether or not these individuals have any kind of history. But as I said, I think we've got to craft proactive interventions to make sure that we are reaching these young people before they make a fatal decision that puts them on a path of being exposed to the criminal justice system. We've got to intervene with these kids. There's no question. And we've got to get them back in school. I've spent a lot of time talking to folks that are directly involved, particularly in the juvenile courts, and it's very clear to me that we've got to do much more. We've got to bring in the entire ecosystem of folks, from the courts to the prosecutors, also the social services organizations that do work supporting these young people. But we've got to bring the message right to the young people, meet them where they are, and let them know that if they decide to go in this direction, to rob someone at gunpoint, no less, that we have to and we will hold them accountable. But I'm hopeful that we are going to reach and prick the consciousness of many and really dissuade them from going down this path. But we've got to amplify that message and act aggressively and proactively to do just that, and we will.
I have a cluster of, you talked about schools, CPS, CTU related questions, so I'll ask those, and then I will ask questions in order that I receive them. Questions are from Carla Leal at Telemundo, Marianne Ahern, myself, Sarah Karp, Dawn Rice from the Washington Post. And I might be missing someone. First, what are the latest developments you can share regarding bargaining sessions taking place right now between CPS and CTU, and would you, or should CPS be open to a mediator as requested by CTU?
So on the mediator question, I did address this yesterday. We agreed to a mediator back in November, and we went back to the CTU, and unfortunately there was no follow-up. We're absolutely open to a mediator, but we want to make sure that there is a seriousness of purpose, that this is not going to delay the negotiations. I think we have an obligation to the parents and to the students to move aggressively. We need more time at the bargaining table. We've been at the table every day this week, but 40 minutes a day is not enough. So we've got to move more aggressively. We've got to be at the table for as long as it takes to get a deal done. I think we can get a deal done. We are committed to doing just that. And any tools that we can use that move us in a direction of bringing this now 60 plus days of negotiation to a closure so that we can get kids the option of coming back in person, that's what we need to do.
Any updates specifically from this afternoon you can provide?
I don't have any specific updates that I can provide publicly. Obviously, the negotiations are going forward. We had Dr. Arwady go to the table today to address some of the issues around vaccine, but that's as far as I feel comfortable going at this point.
A union spokesperson says that the directive to its members is the same. If a safety agreement is not reached today, they're going to tell members, teachers, to stay remote tomorrow. What measures will be taken if teachers do stay remote tomorrow? Will you lock them out?
Well, I don't think we should be talking about lockouts. What we should be talking about is how do we get a deal done so that we can move forward. We've had 3 weeks of successfully implementing the plan that CPS put in place, and by the way, that they shared and adapted as a result of discussions with the CTU. Every single day, what we see is our case rates going down, our positivity rates lowered. We should be talking about how we get a deal done. That's what we should be focused on.
It's almost 4 in the afternoon, though, so to follow up myself, if that is the directive at this juncture, yesterday you came out and you said, everyone keep your kids home, pre-K and cluster. It is 4 in the afternoon. If that's the directive for tomorrow, what do you anticipate happening on the CPS side for tomorrow? Well,
again, I don't want to speak ahead of CPS communicating directly with parents. The board meeting, I think, ended recently, and there will be a further communication from CPS to parents.
Do you know about what time that will?
I don't have that time as I sit here, but we can certainly get that for you.
Okay. Dawn Rice from the Washington Post asks, how is this different from the 2019 strike? Not that there's a strike at this point, but how is this dispute different from the 2019 dispute?
We're in a pandemic. We're in a pandemic.
Gotcha.
And we're addressing issues about the schools, which are safe, not only safe as evaluated by our Chicago Department of Public Health, but safe as to CDC guidance and a number of studies that have been done both here in Chicago and across the world. Schools are not generally the source of spread, particularly when you invest in the precautions and mediation efforts like we have. So it's an apples to oranges, I think, comparison. But certainly, I would like to see more movement on the part of CTU so that we can get a deal done. As I said, 3 weeks of proof positive that we can open schools and open them safely. And as Dr. Artie said last night, no one can guarantee that there won't be someone within the school community that might test positive. That's not the issue. The issue is what do we do to put in mitigations to minimize the possibility of any school spread, and do we have policies and procedures in place in the event that that happens so that we can isolate and quarantine and minimize any community spread. We've had those in place for months now. We've enhanced them. And as I said, over the course of 3 weeks, the plan is working exactly as we thought it would.
2 more questions and then I'll move on. This one from Sarah Karp. Some teachers who are refusing to go to schools to teach got letters threatening to lock them out. Can you comment on that?
I can't comment on any specifics. And as I said, what I am focused on as mayor is making sure that we're at the table and getting a deal done.
And finally on this topic is how does this impact in-person learning, the return of in-person learning for the K through 8th graders on Monday? Is it still on track?
It's still our intent to have students return on Monday.
Okay. Now going back to the questions as I receive them. This one is from Lisa Donovan from the Tribune. Vice President Harris called mayors around the country last week to discuss the Biden-Harris COVID-19 stimulus plan. What did you discuss with her? And did she share anything that gives you hope Chicago will see some economic aid?
Well, I appreciated the outreach from the vice president, but I'm never going to share any conversation that I had with her.
Not even a little bit of information. Okay.
It was very cordial and very informative.
Okay, this question from Heather Sharon. Do you still favor the creation of an independent commission to redraw the ward boundaries based on the results of the 2020 census? Latino caucus member Alderman Maldonado said aldermen were best equipped to draw those maps equitably and said it was a, quote, myth that an independent commission would be more fair. Do you agree with him?
Well, with due respect to the alderman, here's what I think. In this time that we are in, where I think we all have to be focused on reassuring our residents that the government works for them, a relic of the past of having ward boundaries drawn in a back room is just that, a relic of the past. Obviously, aldermen have a role to play, and they should have a role to play. We have put forward resources to make sure that there is adequate funding to support this effort. But what I know is I've repeatedly heard from residents all across the city that they feel like their neighborhood interests are not reflected best in ward boundaries. If you take, for example, the neighborhood that I live in, which is Logan Square, I think we are parsed between 4 or 5 different wards. Same thing with Back of the Yards. Same thing with Chinatown. And really the list goes on and on. If you look at the ward boundaries, they don't make any sense, and they don't respect neighborhood boundaries. People want to know that they have a voice, that they have the ability to elect a person that represents their neighborhood, that speaks their values, and that someone that they can hold accountable. And again, obviously, aldermen have a very specific role to play, and they should. But this can't be a backroom, closed-door deal that the public has no insights into because whatever the product is, it's not going to have legitimacy. And for those aldermen who are concerned about re-election, a good way to show, to invite a challenge is to completely lock the public out of the process. I am confident that we will come up with something that strikes the right balance, that accounts for the public's views about how their neighborhoods need to be preserved and protected. Obviously, with 50 wards, it's always challenging to figure out and strike the right balance, but I think we can do better than what the current map looks like.
Any other, a question from, I think Erin Hegarty, on this topic, just to make sure I'm getting her question in there. Anything else that you see would make the process more fair and equitable? Any other specifics?
Well, like I said, that's a conversation that we need to have with members of the City Council, and we've already started some of those discussions, but we also need to invite the public in. I know this is an issue of great interest.
This question from Alex Nitkin at the Daily Line. This morning, a group of aldermen held a press conference advocating their proposal to change the Affordable Requirements Ordinance. When can we expect to see a version of this ordinance that you support, and what elements, if any, will that legislation incorporate from the Chicago Inclusive Housing Ordinance that was introduced in November?
So the Department of Housing and Commissioner Navarro are working on those issues, and when we have an update, we'll certainly let you know.
Let's do 2 more. 2 more? Mm-hmm. Okay. This one, I'm going in order here. This one from Dave Glowatz from Inside Chicago Government. Why not release detailed results of the investigation into the police officers who occupied Congressman Bobby Rush's campaign office last June?
It's not a why not, it's a question of when. Those officers have only recently been notified of the disciplinary recommendations against them, and following standard protocol, those details will be released at the appropriate time.
This question from my colleague Chris Ty at CBS 2. We're hearing reports that the IHSA is going to greenlight a shortened youth basketball season, 7 weeks total. Teams could compete once they complete 7 practices. What do you say to families for whom every day there is no school or practice, their basketball player is one day closer to potentially not getting a scholarship?
Well, first I'm going to say my daughter will be extraordinarily happy to hear that news. She's not a high schooler, but she's someone who does play basketball and has been really, along with her friends, mourning the loss of the competitive basketball season. You know that I'm a huge sports fan and really love high school sports. I think this last 300 plus days has been extraordinarily difficult on those young athletes, many of whom were depending upon being able to showcase their talents during the course of competitive competition to win college scholarships. So I'm really glad to hear that news, and I fully support it. We've got to get kids back in productive activities and not just sitting and staring at screens. This has been really, really hard on our young people, really hard on their families. I hear from parents all the time, and I know from my own experience with our 12-year-old, we've got to give kids productive outlets, and I think I'm grateful that the IHSA has realized that we need to move more in that direction.
All right, we'll do 2 more.
Thank you. I only have 2 more. Mayor, this is from Craig Dellamore.
I saw you negotiating.
Yes, in writing on my legal pad. Craig Dellamore, what should be the next steps for the Cop House pilot program, and how does the substitute ordinance address your reservations about the effort?
Well, if you look at the actual language of the order, it makes everything contingent upon the satisfaction of the superintendent and the budget director, and unless and until all the issues that I identified, like the budget, the location, the identity of supposedly there's a developer, who the funder is, what the funding sources are, how this complements, if at all, our community policing strategy. That's a short list of all the questions. The order that was passed gives the opportunity for us to fully evaluate the proposal, and unless and until all of those questions are answered to our satisfaction, it won't move forward.
And lastly, from France Spielman, what is your reaction to the proposal from downtown Alderman Brendan Riley to let pot shops move into the heart of the loop, doing away with the exclusion zone you created last year?
My views on that have not changed. We're not turning Michigan Avenue into the pot paradise. We made a lot of concessions, as we should have, going back and forth with members of the City Council, and particularly downtown aldermen, where we expanded the opportunities in the River North area in particular. Now, the reality is, I don't think much is going to be happening one way or the other because, as you know, there's multiple lawsuits that have been filed against the state based upon what I understand happened in other jurisdictions. It's probably going to be years, realistically, before that litigation is resolved. So I appreciate Alderman Riley's interest. My concern about the effect on the shopping and tourist jewel of our city really hasn't changed one whit since the fall of 2019 when we first started wrestling with this issue.
And
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dana.